Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Indie Grounds podcast. And I am so happy you are here to listen in. And I am very excited to talk about this next band. What's really interesting, though, was this was probably the hardest band to research. I don't know why. There is just little to no information out there about them. And it's not like they're like a very obscure band, or they're so obscure or indie that, or they're a local band, so that nationally there's no, information about them, or there wouldn't be any Wikipedia pages even that are built about them. But this band, they got on the Fueled by Ramen label. They were noticed by Pete Wentz and Ryan Ross from Panic at the Disco and Fall Out Boy, or vice versa, I should say. They're from Chicago, Illinois, and their songs appeared on very well-known television shows. I think one of them was even Grey's Anatomy. So again, it's not like they're a very small band. Yes, they are, you could say, like an indie band, and it's not like they're selling out arenas, but at the same time, they're not extremely small either. Sorry for the rant, but it was hard. It was hard. I think I ended up having to literally get most of the information off of Wikipedia, which I don't like doing. I like, reading different articles, especially when there's different viewpoints, when there's different conflicts of interest, especially if I am talking about somebody or someone controversial. I don't want to just go on one website. It's like I need to read up on it. I need to see different points of view on it. So, yeah, it was hard. I've even seen this band live as well. They put on an amazing show. Without further ado, though, let's just get into it. Who am I talking about here? Who am I going on a rant about? Well, the band is called The Hush Sound. And like I said, they're from Chicago, Illinois, from the United States. And this was probably the mid to late 2000s. I would say maybe into the 2010s, just a little bit. But mostly the late 2000s. They're an alternative band. I wouldn't really put them as punk. Even though they did open for many punk bands, I would not put them that way. I would stick them with alternative. And let's just go into their history. So, the Hush Sound had started very, very young age. Their lead guitarist, or one of their, I shouldn't say lead, I can't quite remember if he's lead or rhythm, but one of their guitarists and lead singer, and then their pianist, and you could say other lead singer, you could say maybe they're co-singers, because during their musical tenure, they kind of split the number of songs, or they would feature off of each other's songs as well. But their lead guitarist, when he started the band, he was in 10th grade. And this is where it gets a little weird, I'm not going to lie. I was surprised by this when I researched it. Their pianist, she was in 7th, maybe 8th grade when they started the band. I don't think they officially named themselves right away. But, again, you're thinking she's 13, 14, and he is, maybe she's like 12, 13. I would say oldest 14, and he's probably about 16 years old. When they started their band, they started performing, and then they signed on Extra People, I would say a few years later, and then they released their first album by themselves, which was pretty good. So Sudden is the name of their first album. And it was a great album. You had great songs on there. Momentum is one of them. The Artist is another one. And I would definitely recommend Crawling Towards the Sun, which was, I would say, their first hit off that album. But a song I would highly recommend is Echo. Very underrated song, does not get a lot of recognition and love. Go check it out if you want to check this band out. But their efforts on this album and then the follow-up tour caught the attention, like I said earlier, of one Pete Wentz from Fall Out Boy and Ryan Ross from Panic at the Disco. And Ryan made a specific push to Pete and even Patrick Stump as well, to get these guys on the Fueled by Ramen label and to get these guys on tour with them and their many acts at the time, which is exactly what happened. And when they released their second album, which had their probably biggest single to date, We Intertwined, that's when they started to tour like crazy with the big bands at the time. If you're going to listen to their second album as well, I would highly recommend the song Wine Red too. It's a great song. But anyway, they started touring with Fall Out Boy. They started touring with Panic at the Disco. They started being a supporting act to The Academy Is at the time. And even All American Rejects as well. So that punk scene back then, they were right in the middle of it. And what's crazy is I believe when they released their first album, So Sudden, Elena was around 17 years old. She might have been 18. And then when their second album came out, again, she's probably pushing 19, 20, at oldest 21 years of age. She's so young at the time. And then I would say not even a year, maybe 2 years later, released their third album as well. So again, if you're doing the math, she's probably 21, 22, I would say at most 23 years old by the time their third album comes out. And then their other lead singer and guitar player is not much older than she is. He's probably in his mid-20s, 25, 26, at most 27, and by the time their third album is out. It's absolutely crazy how young they were when they first got big and then how fast everything happened to them by the time their third album came out. In fact, you could even argue that it was to their own detriment, because not long after their third album was released, they actually went their separate ways as a band and went on hiatus. Now, at the time, they didn't, I wouldn't say, and I couldn't really find too much information on the breakup. You're going to find out a little later why I don't think it was that bad. But she released a solo album. He released, well, I wouldn't say a solo album, but he went on to tour with a couple other bands. And I believe their bass player kind of formed a super band as well with other kind of punk rock and rock musicians at the time as well. So, again, it's kind of a tale as old as time for young bands. They all kind of split off separately and started to record their own music. But that actually did not last for too long. About, I would say, 3 or 4 years later, they regrouped and then released a fourth album. I would say it's kind of an unofficial fourth album. There wasn't a lot of songs on it. And it's funny because they called the album 45, and I saw them live, and their lead guitar player went on to explain that they did that because it was the number that Michael Jordan used when he tried to come back into the NBA. So he said, you kind of see that he was over the hump, but you also recognized him for what he did back then. I know that They are huge Chicago Bulls fans as a band. So that was kind of funny. So they released that album, their unofficial fourth album, or official. Hey, if it was their official fourth album, kudos to them. It was a great album. I remember listening to it as well. But that is pretty much the history of the Hush Sound. As far as I know, it says that they are still a band, and they might be touring. I couldn't find a lot of information on that, but yeah, it says they are still a band. They are not broken up. So maybe it's also one of those things where if they have gone their separate ways again, they could do it so in a way where maybe they can come back together and perform as the Hush Sound again, if they so chose. So that is the history of the Hush Sound. Was it a band where they were just kind of rushed too quickly and had tried to do too much too soon, so it kind of burnt them out? Is it a case of they didn't really get a chance to kind of look into themselves and see if this was really something that they wanted to do before their band kind of hit it off too big? I didn't really see them on any kind of big television shows, so again, maybe this is just kind of personal bias, but I just feel like they never got their full shot, their full potential. I wish they could have reached more people, because they're just such a great band. Again, I kind of name dropped a couple songs, but if you want to check them out, Momentum, Crawling Towards the Sun, Echo, The Artist, We Intertwined, Wine Red. I'm trying to think of songs on their second album. Sweet Tangerine is a great one. Under the Curtain is a great one. Honey is a great one off their third album. As You Cry is a great song. Just check them out. Great listen to a great band. And yeah, that's all I got to say about the Hush Sound for this week. I hope to see you all soon.